Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Apologies, I'm a couple of minutes late. Of course, they're doing a live. Instagram decided not to start for me straight away. So today I'm really excited because in just a moment I'm going to be introducing to you Elle from 23 Wise Words. And she is a copywriter who helps people with sales psychology. Right wording into their website to really help with those conversions happening on the website. So I am super keen to talk to her today and share with you some of her tips on how we can really inject some brand personality into our copy so that, we're connecting with our ideal customers, but we are also not sounding the same as everybody else, because when we sound the same, we all are just like wallpaper. And hey, Elle has joined me. Nice to see you today.
Me too.
So I will get you to introduce yourself, Elle, just in case people don't know you so well from my audience. And then I've got some questions here that I want to ask you, and we'll dive into those.
Yeah, no worries. So, I'm Elle. I run a copywriting business called 23 Wise Words. So I help business owners to build, two ways really. Build their copy confidence. So I run workshops where I teach business owners how to actually write their web copy. So they kind of write it themselves with me in their corner. And then the other way is actually doing one-on-one with clients to write website copy for them. My background is in psychology, so I'm very much into the kind of sales psychology and consumer behavior, and really kind of delving into the hearts and minds of the customer and the clients mainly, because I work with service businesses predominantly, to really just kind of give your copy that extra depth and give them, just give it that kind of, that extra strategy behind the words.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think we're quite similar, because I did psychology at university as well. And with, 20 years working in marketing and studying by behavior and what works and what doesn't, I just, learned so long ago that to really connect with people through your copy, you've got to talk to them like a human and not like a business, even if your clients are businesses. And, my background, like yours probably, especially in the corporate world, was a lot of B2B. So, I'm writing on behalf of a business brand, and I'm speaking to people who are buying on behalf of a business, or they are a business. And I think that one of the biggest mistakes people make is treating that person like they're an object, like it's a business, and like you're talking to the whole business. And it's like, guys, it is a person to person communication here. You've got to pretend that you're one person and you're talking to one person. Otherwise it's just totally boring. So
boring and overwhelming, I think. I think when you sit down to write and you're kind of, I'm writing to a business or a mass of people, that gets really overwhelming. Whereas if you kind of narrow it down and think of a person like we're talking right now, it's so much easier to know what to say when you can actually picture a person and a human you're talking to, rather than a business or a target audience, So
absolutely. Yeah, it does make it so much easier for sure. So, okay, we'll dive in to the first tip or question that I've got from people for you. So the question is, should my brand voice reflect how I speak or try to appeal to my target audience?
Yeah, so I hear this a lot where business owners, especially when you're very small and it's kind of you doing all the writing, or you've maybe got a small team and you're kind of trying to keep consistency amongst everyone, and it's kind of like, should I talk like myself, or should I try and appeal to the person I am talking to? And look, as you get bigger, for example, if you think of the big kind of brands like Amazon, for example, their brand voice does not reflect Jeff Bezos' brand voice. That wouldn't work. However, as a small business, particularly with the rise of this personal brand, where especially for service businesses, people are becoming the face of their business. They want to be seen on Instagram Live. Their about page has a picture of them. It's very much kind of, you're the face of the business, especially if you're working one-on-one with clients. So you kind of really do speak to your clients one-on-one in order to offer your service. I would say in order to avoid confusion, talk like you talk. You know, try and inject your own personality into your brand personality, because it's going to just be so much easier for you than trying to second guess what your client might want to hear. And I actually heard an analogy once. There's a really great, she's an American brand strategist called Kay Putman. I don't know if you've heard of her, and she's very much into the kind of brand voice and stuff. And she once said that trying to change your personality to be like your clients is almost like trying to change your personality to be like one of your friends. So it's kind of like, you know, oh, I'm trying to fit in. I want you to like me, so I'm going to talk like you. And it's just really comes across as in genuine and kind of inauthentic and genuine. So I would always say, if you're trying to decide, it's easier and more genuine, and you'll come across better if you just try and talk like yourself, which I know is easier said than done, and we'll kind of come on to ways you can do that in a minute. But I would always say, especially if you are speaking, if you're going to kind of write on your website, for example, in a certain way, and then you get on the phone with someone in your discovery calls and you sound totally different, then, you know, there's that kind of real inconsistency there, and that's when you start to lose people's trust. I
think that there's there's a bit of advice out there that probably gets confusing, because so many people say, well, what do your audience say? And, you know, find the words that they use and then use them when you talk back to them. And so there's that confusion of, well, do I talk like myself or do I talk like them? And, you know, how do we get that piece in the middle? And I always think, well, it's not about, you know, it's not about you trying to sound like them or you sounding like something that's not yourself, but where there's a word that they might use that they're familiar with and you've got another word, you know, that's where I would inject their word in if it flows and makes sense with your vocabulary, but that's not changing your style. So you definitely want to be using the words that they are familiar with, especially if there's a choice of words there that you could, you know, use one or the other. But when, you know, I think the old way of doing branding, like when we had business branding and, you know, big companies, and you're trying to think, well, what is the voice that my ideal customer really wants to hear? As a personal brand, that means that you're stepping outside of who you are. It's like you said, it's becoming not authentic to yourself. And you know, I'm of the opinion that, hey, if you are you, your ideal clients are drawn to you. Be yourself and be comfortable, be confident in being you, because, hey, if they don't like it, that's okay. Like, they're not your ideal client. It's not going to be liked by everybody in the world. It's not the most important thing.
And
your
it's going
clients
to
will resonate.
That kind of working relationship hard as well. If they get on with you in writing, but then they don't get on with you in person, that's kind of, that, you know, that's not a great working relationship. And coming back to your point about using words and phrases your clients use in your copy, that is so important. And like, I really do advocate for that as well. But there is a kind of a point where, so for example, I had a client who I was working with whose website I'm rewriting, and she'd use the word optimize your chances to do what she did. And I kind of said to her, you wouldn't use that word when you're talking to someone, and your client would never use the word optimize my chances to. So that's a really good example of how you can switch out that word for one you would use, you know, if you wouldn't use the word optimize, and your client wouldn't use the word optimize. So it's just kind of thinking like that, you know, thinking how do you speak conversationally and using those words in your copy.
And thinking, well, how would I explain it to someone if we were talking and having a conversation? Because I think when we write, you know, all these other words come out that probably are in our vocabulary that we read, but they're not actually how we would talk if we're explaining it to somebody. Absolutely. And I think as well, you know, so something else that a lot of my clients have, they're not at the point of having a personal brand yet, or don't feel that they have one. They feel like they have a business brand. However, if you are your business, if you are the service provider who is offering the service, then whether you like it or not, you do have a personal brand. You may not be at the forefront. You might not be putting your face out there. You might not be feeling like you're out there, but people are buying you. They're buying your service, and it's very much about you. And regardless of the fact that you've got a business brand and not, you know, your business isn't named yourself like my one is, it's a bit easier because I'm me, so I talk as me, and that makes sense. But if you've got a business brand, you know, I like to say, well, look at the example something like Richard Branson and Virgin. You know, that is a huge company, but it is very much in line with his values. It's got his personality. You know, he is very at the forefront of that brand, and I think without him it doesn't have that personality. But it was actually one of the major reasons why they had so much success, because they're cutting through all of the corporate brands that just were speaking like a business, like a machine or a robot, and then they came along with a lot of personality. So it can be done no matter what size your business. I think that's kind of what I really want to get across there, that no matter where you're coming from, you can do that.
And it can be a really good differentiator. Like you talked when you were talking before in the intro about how you know, you don't want to sound like everybody else. So if you can sound different, the best way to sound different is to sound like you, because no one does kind of talk exactly the way you talk. So, and if you think of the brands that really do stand out, and Virgin's a good example, or the Air New Zealand, you know, with they've got such a quirky brand voice that you remember them, and they differentiate themselves through their brand voice. So it can be a really nice differentiator for your brand. So, you know, you don't need to stand out in other ways, but you can stand out through your voice, and it can be a nice, easy way to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I totally agree. So, okay, the second challenge that people have is they feel like, you know, when they're talking to their clients, they're really warm and personable, but then when it comes to write, they get very formal. So how do they deal with that? How do you bring your personality out in your wording?
I hear that a lot as well. So I had a client I worked with, she was lovely, so warm, and her business was really around that. She about kind of helping people with their health, and had to be really empathetic. And she was like, as soon as I put pen to paper, I feel like I just come across really cold. And like, how can we fix that? So look, the reason is because we spend however many years at school being taught to write a certain way. So you know, you have to structure your sentences a certain way. You have to speak academically to show that you understand the knowledge that's been taught. And it's very formal, and that's the way you're taught. And then 10 years later, 15 years later, you start your business, and suddenly you're told, in order to connect with your clients, you have to talk like a human. You have to inject loads of emotion. You have to be really animated. And you're like, but no one's taught you how to do that. So there's this massive disconnect between everything you were taught and now what you're expected to do. And so, yeah, it's a massive problem. And I think the way to go about it is just to think, how do I talk in real life? In real life, you do start sentences with the word and. You do start sentences with but. You start sentences with because. And so if you can inject that into your writing, you know, it makes it sound more human. So don't worry about the grammatical rules you were taught. So
I know.
Throw out the rule book.
Unlearn it all. Unlearn all of the rules.
And I always say, just kind of when you're talking to someone, just think, like, start paying more attention to how they're talking to you. So when you're talking to clients on calls, even when they're emailing you, when you're talking to your friends, like, how do they describe the problems they've got? How do they describe the solutions they want? How do you talk to people? And when you hear interesting phrases or something that just stands out, make a note of it. So I've got an Evernote, which I call very imaginatively interesting copy. And like, this Evernote is just like loads and loads of, like, when I've read something that I found really interesting, or someone said something to me and I was like, that's a really nice way of putting it. And I just keep a note, and then whenever I've written anything, I go back to my interesting copy Evernote, and I just kind of say, it's the different ways I can say it that sounds more human, that I've heard people say in conversation. So that's a really good way of doing it. Another way is actually and you've probably heard this one before, but read it out loud. If you've written something, say it out loud, because you'll then start to understand, because some people talk in very long, flowy sentences, and some people talk quite quickly and like give shorter sentences. So if you read it out loud, you'll start to understand your own intonation and how you actually talk, and then you can start putting that into your copy by using more full stops or using exclamation marks, and kind of building out your personality through your punctuation a little bit. And also you'll be like, I don't use that word, but if you say a word out loud and you're like, I would never say that, take it out of your writing, you know? So it really helps to say it out loud.
Yeah, totally. And I think that that's the two things that I'm like, if I'm trying to help somebody right at the beginning and there's so much to remember, the first one is just to use conjunctions, because it stops you sounding like a robot straight away.
Yeah.
So it's like, you know, when you have used correct English, you will sound like a robot instead of when you've used conjunctions, you'll sound like a real human. And just, those two tiny things where you know, instead of saying you are or you will as two separate words, which I think is something I see everywhere. You know, literally that one thing of putting it together into the you'll or your makes a huge difference to how your copy flows when people read it, and it really does sound so much more human. And like you said, the other one is the punctuation, because when we speak, we actually talk in really long sentences because we can use pauses and intonation in our voice. But when you're reading it, you know, we don't want a 5-line sentence, especially not online, you know. And I think that as you would be a website copywriter, you must be doing it all the time, like breaking that up, you know, turning it into much smaller chunks and sentences so people can read it and scan it much easier.
Full stops are your friend. If in doubt, comma or full stop, always go full stop. You know, that's my one tip. Like I see not enough commas all the time, and I see commas where you could be putting a full stop and starting a new sentence. And the reason people do that is because they're like, oh, but I can't start the sentence with and or but. But you can. So put a full stop in, start the next sentence with but, or start it with because it'll break up your, like you said, online people want short, snappy sentences and paragraphs.
Yeah. People are not reading every word. They're literally scanning through and picking out the best bits. So totally. I'm
another thing actually that's just occurred to me while you were talking is the use of adjectives. So so some people in real life are quite direct. I worked with a client who's like very straight talking, very direct. This is how it is. If you like it this way, you can work with me. It was very much like that. So the way to translate that into her copy was to literally remove all adjectives. So we don't use very ever. We don't use probably ever. We don't use those words that kind of soften what you're saying. It's very much like cross out all the adjectives, and your writing will instantly become much more direct and straightforward if that's what tone of voice you want to go for.
Great. And I think that what those direct ones can be so powerful, especially when they're used in certain places, like definitely around the call to actions, because you want someone to take action. You know, and if you're using language like, oh, if you would like to do this, then please come along and have a look at that. Someone's like, that is just so much less powerful than say, hey, have a look here, sign up today, or whatever it is. And it's fine to be direct about that, because you want a direct response. You want them to do it right now. So keep it really simple, keep it really clear, and give them that invitation to take action. Now I think one of the challenges that people have, especially when you're working with a copywriter, because whether or not you think you're good at writing copy or not, so, everyone has a different level of a skill set, and so often you'll think, oh, I want to outsource this, I don't have time, or I just need someone else who's not me to write about it because I'm too close. How do you get across how to sound like you to a copywriter? Because of course we all know how we sound, and when we write, we're probably writing the words in our head, but how do your clients get that across to you in a way that you can write as them and have it sound like them?
So look, I would say the responsibility falls into the copywriter's camp to ask you the right questions and get the right information out of you for them to then be able to do their job. So quite often, the best thing, the holy grail would be to create a tone voice document with your client when you start working with them. So actually go through that process and actually define the tone of voice, put it in writing, and then you've kind of got that as reference, and they can use it whenever they're using any marketing from then on. But sometimes that's not always the case, and you kind of, if you're doing something quickly or they just don't have the budget for that kind of thing, then there are other ways that you can kind of coax it out. And like I said, don't, as a business owner, don't think it's in your responsibility to get it across. Your copywriter, a good copywriter, should be able to ask you the right questions to coax it out of you. Definitely they should be asking to see writing that you've written that you like. So maybe 2 or 3 pieces of writing. It might even be an Instagram caption. It might be a blog post you wrote, something where they were like, that really nails my voice. This copywriter should be asking to see that. And, you know, it helps to find a copywriter who you like their writing style. You know, like, you know, part of the skill of copywriting is to actually adapt depending on the brand voice. And you can there's a scale of adaptivity kind of to formal and conversational, different types of tones of voice. But it can really help just to, if you read a copywriter's website and you're like, I really like that tone of voice, it just helps to just kind of have that little basis to start with.
Yeah.
So that can really, it's kind of like looking at their portfolio in a way. It's like, if you're looking at their portfolio and they've worked with clients that are similar to you, that kind of would make you think that they could help you. And also if their writing style is similar to what you like, then it just adds that credibility factor that they probably write for you.
And they can probably just add like a few of your you know, your words that you would commonly use. I think we all have words that we use more than other words when we explain things, and that might be, you know, copywriters I've worked with in the past have definitely had like a little file of like, these are Jess words, you know, this is what she says when she talks, and so they put them in, and it makes it sound like me, and it's just amazing. Just like literally just little things that might be in the copy, like totally this, or, you know, and I would go, do I really say that? And they're like, yeah, you do.
That's good.
So yeah, it's, I mean, and that really works. It's amazing to how that then comes across just like me.
Well, perfect. And the other thing your copywriter should be doing, which is what the ones that worked with you would be, is making sure you're having as many conversations with your client as you can. So if you have a question to ask, you know, don't obviously bombard them with phone calls, but initially, especially when you first start that working relationship, you want to be talking to them as much as you can, watching videos they might have recorded and put on their Instagram or YouTube. If they've done anything on their website already, watch how they say things, listen as they're talking, and pick it up that way as well. So then they're not necessarily having to tell you, because sometimes they don't know, like you just said, I don't know what my words are, but they pick them up, and so sometimes it's kind of, you can't actually connect that. So it's up to them to speak to you and then really kind of be listening and picking out those words and phrases that you use for you. So those would be my tips. Tone of voice document is the kind of ideal. If you can't do that, definitely get on as many calls as you can and see if you can like watch videos and things. Ask them to share content with you that they've written before, and try and find someone who has a very kind of similar style to you. It doesn't have to be exact, but just if they kind of meet you on the conversational level, because some are a bit more formal and some aren't. So
yeah, absolutely. And there's so many different types of writing as well, you know. When you're writing for an article, you know, if it's going to be published in the media or a book or something like that, then it's quite different to how you might write on social media. So even your own writing might change a little bit depending on how, you know, where it's going to be used. And I think that, you know, even if you don't have, you know, you don't have a brand guide or those tone of voice documents, even just doing like a simple brand style. So I've got like a really easy, it's free on my website. You can download like a brand strategy worksheet, and it just takes you through that really top level of your brand strategy of, you know, what are your personality types? You know, how would you describe it? How do you like to sound? What are your values? So that the copywriter can take that, and then you can understand what it is that they're trying to come across as. And then that would help you as well in choosing, or what's the right way to do that. Because if they want to stand out and be totally rebellious or something like that as their brand, then, hey, you're going to be pumping some of that stuff into the copy to make you stand out, to really say something that might be totally different to how everybody else says it. So, I think that would be...
Sometimes flipping it around, so finding stuff you don't like can really help a copywriter as well. So like, I would never say this. I really don't like this tone of voice. And it sounds kind of counterintuitive, but when you are going through that brand strategy phase, a lot of the time someone like brand strategies will ask you to say not just what you like and what your brand personalities are, but what isn't, what aren't you as a brand. So it can help to think that as well. And sometimes that's easier.
I always love to ask the negative question, because, you know, you ask like, well, you know, who are you targeting? Well, that's really hard to answer at first. But if I say, well, who are you not? Who do you not want to work with? The negative question often helps you get clarity on the positive questions. So 100%. Yeah, those are really, really great tips. Thank you, Elle. Have you got any final words? How can people find out a bit more about you if they're, you know, thinking, wow, I really need to up my game on my copy and get my website copy done? How can they find out a bit more about you?
Yeah, so I'm at 23 Wise Words on Instagram. My website is 23 Wise Words, and there's a link in my bio to my website and to my website Words Workshop. I like alliteration, as you can probably tell. So
love it.
I will alliterate anything if I can. So
oh, me too. I can't help it, and sometimes they're really bad.
yeah, you're like, oh, that was a bit of a tenuous alliteration, but I'll go with it. So yeah, Instagram. I'm always on Instagram sharing tips. Yeah, it's probably the best place to find me.
Yeah, awesome.
All right.
That's so good. Thank you so much for joining me today. It's been awesome, and I'm sure that everybody has got some great tips out of that and some really good content ideas to go away with. So thank you for joining. Thanks for watching on replay if you're watching on the replay, and I'll talk to you soon, Elle.
Yeah, speak soon. Thanks, Jess. Bye.
Okay, bye.